Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're unpacking an absolutely fascinating story, what is arguably one of the most dramatic economic and political turnarounds of the 20th century. We're looking at the Botswana exception, and how a nation went from being severely neglected to becoming Africa's gold standard for stable governance and economic growth. Okay, let's dive into this.
Here's our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the forgotten borderland. Check out their traditions of democracy and see exactly how they went about beating the resource curse. After that, we'll look ahead to the 2026 economic pivot and wrap up with the true measure of sovereignty.
Section 1. The Forgotten Borderland. 1966 Independence.
To really get the baseline we're starting from here, you have to picture this. When the British Empire left the newly named Botswana in September 1966, they basically assumed it was just a worthless expanse of sand. When they first raised their flag, the entire nation possessed exactly 12 kilometers, that's just 7.5 miles, of paved roads in the whole country. I mean, think about your daily commute. That was their entire national infrastructure.
And the human capital situation? Just as stark. Out of a population of 500,000 people, there were fewer than 100 university graduates. So yeah, global expectations couldn't have been bleaker. The colonial administration literally ran the territory from inside South Africa, meaning they didn't even have a national capital inside their own borders. The UN classified Botswana as one of the absolute poorest countries in the world, and honestly, most experts expected the new nation to just collapse or get swallowed up by the surrounding apartheid regimes. It is the ultimate zero-to-hero underdog baseline.
Let's move to Section 2 and see how this builds. Traditions of democracy. Blending the old and the new.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is exactly why Botswana succeeded where so many others stumbled. The secret lies in an indigenous concept called the Klotla. Long before European contact, the Tswana people practiced this incredible form of participatory democracy. It was a community assembly where any citizen, regardless of status, could openly criticize the chief and debate tribal laws. It forged this really powerful cultural bedrock of consultation and free speech.
So, when Botswana's first president, Seretse Khama, and co-founder Kwet Masire set out to build a modern state, they did something absolutely genius. They didn't just throw away their traditions. Instead, they grafted the modern British parliamentary system right onto the spirit of the Kokla. They essentially used modern statecraft to elevate a system of checks and balances that the community already inherently understood.
And you can see the results of this hybrid governance right here. Because power had always been checked by the community culturally, they seamlessly transitioned into a multi-party democracy. They have never experienced a military coup, never suffered a civil war, never had a stolen election. This foundation is exactly what makes Botswana Africa's oldest continuous democracy.
Which brings us to Section 3, Beating the Resource Curse, the 1967 Diamond Twist.
Just 1 year after independence, geologists discovered Botswana was sitting on some of the richest diamond deposits on Earth. Now, that sounds like a massive lottery win, right? But historically, this triggers what economists call the resource curse. In almost any other post-colonial state, sudden natural wealth meant doom. It fueled warlords, triggered civil wars, and filled the offshore bank accounts of corrupt leaders instead of actually benefiting the nation.
But Botswana flipped the script. So the crucial point is, President Khama passed an ironclad property law declaring that all mineral wealth belonged to the entire nation, not to individual tribes or regions. This single legal maneuver stopped regional factionalism and resource wars dead in their tracks.
Then, in 1969, they formed Botswana. This was a 50-50 partnership with the global diamond giant De Beers. Just look at the balance of power here. The government of Botswana maintained total sovereignty, controlling the land, setting mining laws, and directing the resource tax. Meanwhile, De Beers bought in the heavy tech, funded the extraction, and managed global sales. It was a brilliantly effective way to bring in outside expertise without surrendering an ounce of their independence. And what did they do with all that diamond revenue? Instead of letting it line politicians' pockets, it was forcibly funneled directly into human capital. They took the wealth straight from the ground and built thousands of schools. They paved thousands of miles of highways, they provided universal health care to their citizens, and, incredibly responsibly, they established the Pula Fund, a sovereign wealth fund set up specifically to save resource money for future generations.
All right, jumping into Section 4, the 2026 economic pivot, life after diamonds.
So, the leaders today know that diamonds are a finite resource, especially with the rise of lab-grown gems disrupting global markets. To survive the next 50 years, they're pivoting hard. And this brilliantly illustrates their strategy. Look at this massive 40% slice right here. Botswana has designated nearly 40% of its land strictly for conservation and ecotourism. They're deliberately going after a low-volume, high-yield strategy to protect incredible wilderness areas like the Okavango Delta while still generating premium revenue.
Their second massive pivot is happening in the capital, Gaborone. They're building out an innovation hub, pouring heavy investment into futuristic digital infrastructure. The goal is to position Botswana as the premier, safe, tech and financial data hub for all of Southern Africa. By leveraging their rock-solid reputation for uncorruptible stability, they're actively future-proofing their economy way beyond natural resources.
Finally, Section 5, True Measure of Sovereignty, Validating the Exception.
We've talked a lot about the narrative of their success, but let's actually validate this with some hard regional data. When we compare Botswana to the sub-Saharan average, the numbers really speak for themselves. In governance, as we mentioned, they're the oldest continuous democracy on the continent, completely avoiding the regional instability you see elsewhere. They consistently rank as the least corrupt nation in all of Africa. And economically, their currency, the pula, is one of the region's absolute strongest, standing in stark contrast to the volatile currency fluctuations in neighboring states.
So what's the big takeaway from all of this? Botswana's story proves that success is absolutely not an accident of nature. It is a deliberate choice of architecture. By blending their traditional values with modern statecraft and fiercely protecting the rule of law with disciplined transparency, the people of Botswana built a sovereign powerhouse quite literally out of the desert sands.
Oh, and I just love this detail about their currency, the pula. In a desert nation, the word pula literally translates to rain or blessing. It is such a poetic reminder of how they tie their economic strength directly back to the very things they value most for their survival and prosperity.
I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. Looking at where Botswana started back in desperate conditions in 1966 and where they are heading with this 2026 tech pivot, are geography and colonial neglect a nation's destiny? Or is the Botswana exception proof that any nation, with the right foundation and choices, can completely rewrite its own future? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking questions, keep learning, and I'll see you next time.